So I guess let's keep going with the private cloud theme. We're on a roll here. So next up, we have Michelle Bailey. She's a analyst at the 451 group, and she works a lot on private cloud research. I guess that's one of the areas, and she's going to come and talk to us about opportunities in private cloud. She's going to host a panel for us. So why don't you come up, Michelle, and maybe give us a little bit of insight into your views on where private cloud's headed and how that's leading to public cloud, maybe. Thanks, John. Thank you.
Please applaud, applaud. It's the afternoon. Thank you for coming back in. I don't know about you, but I can't eat another thing. This has been the greatest event. When we look back on the tape later on this afternoon, it's not that the camera's adding 5 pounds. I actually gained 5 pounds here today. How many of you here can actually wear the jewelry that they handed out as a gift today? No, sir, you can't wear the jewelry. So thank you, Rackspace. This has been another great event. We have a terrific panel here this afternoon to cover private cloud. My name is Michelle Bailey. I am an analyst with 451 Research. And for those of you who don't know 451, we have about 100 analysts worldwide, and we specialize in what we like to think of as innovative and disruptive new technologies. The company's been in business for 10 years, and I can tell you that the market has come to 451 and what we've been looking at over that 10-year period, which is really a complete innovation around the IT operations. I've been lucky enough to have been a mid-range server analyst. I was an x86 server analyst. I covered virtualization. Then I covered the transformation and consolidation of the data center. And now here we are in this next era of IT around cloud. And I can tell you that we remain extremely bullish about what we have often thought about as the hosted market space, or now the service provider market space. The service provider market now is roughly $56 billion annually. And so just to give you a little bit of context around what that number means, when I used to study servers, the server market, in terms of what you as customers are spending on server hardware today, is about $55 billion annually. So what we've seen is this market has doubled over the last 5 years, and now it is as large as what you spend on server hardware. And then going forward, we see very, very aggressive levels of growth in our forecasts. What I want to talk to you about today is really how the market has shifted and changed. And when we would just start getting going around the IT research, very much IT was about innovating around business applications, right? It was very much about financial applications and HR applications and automating the back office. And we've been going through this period of B2B, where businesses are interacting with other businesses in order to facilitate the overall organization. And what we're in right now is this period of what I call the consumer world, where we have B2C taking over, and now we have consumer-to-consumer taking over. So think about Facebook and LinkedIn and all these applications where consumers can deal directly with other consumers. And of course, where we're going is what I think about as the era of things. Consumers to things, and then finally things to things. So what do we mean by that? Wearables, sensors, all those elements that are going to be out in the IT sphere. And what happens is this sphere of IT gets larger and larger and larger, to the point where finally a lot of the gravity in IT actually lives at the outside of this sphere. And what it means for you as IT professionals is the world that you have lived in, where you've had a lot of control around the B2B activities and even to some extent some of the B2C activities. You start to lose that control, and you have to give that control up to other players. So this is a very, very exciting market, and what it ultimately means is just a tremendous amount of innovation, new companies that can come along and innovate on these new platforms and really take advantage of this new market where we're dealing with consumers and things. So how many of you took Uber to get here today? Uber. So it was on the slide earlier this morning. So just to give you an idea of how much innovation is taking place, Uber has raised $1.2 billion in funding. That's billion with a B. And Uber is now valued at $17 billion with a B. And think about a company like Uber. They don't hire employees. They don't hire drivers. They don't own cars. Right? They're essentially a platform that consumers have been able to tap into, and they've been able to innovate a business around that new platform for IT. And we're starting to see this again and again and again in every industry. Pay attention to the credit card market. Look at what's happening with all the direct P2P payments. Think about how something like Apple Pay could potentially disintermediate what had been a very established business around credit cards. So we're seeing this all the time, and one thing I used to worry about tremendously up until recently was, what does this mean for the IT department? Is the IT department dead? And what we continue to see is that cost of capital is at an all-time low. And what does this mean? This means that if you work in an established business that's not ready to innovate and invest in IT and innovate and invest around new business models, what you're going to see is new companies come along, they're going to raise money, not always at $1.2 billion, but raise a lot of money, and then blow right past all the incumbent companies that aren't ready to make that commitment and aren't ready to invest in new businesses. And we see this again and again. And what's really interesting when the cost of capital is low is that yields on long-term investments start to look almost as good as short-term investments. So there's really no reason why organizations shouldn't be investing in some of these new businesses, and particularly investing in their own IT. And what we also have seen over the last 5-7 years is that the executives at IT organizations have built their careers on cost cutting. We went through this very long and extended period of consolidation, virtualization, optimization. And what we did was we built this generation of IT executives that knew how to take out cost, but haven't been trained on how to innovate and grow the top line in the business. It was very, very troubling. And one of the things I always used to talk about was how you have to have a very balanced IT project portfolio. So there should be healthy investments in growth, maintenance, and also shrinking the IT project portfolio. And what we saw for a long time is what you see on the left. There was an overcommitment to trimming and consolidation, and a much healthier view is what you see in the middle. So 451 has engaged with Microsoft over the last 2 years. We do a very large study with them across the globe, 11 countries. We talked to 2,000 hosting customers and service provider customers, and we asked them, what does your IT project portfolio look like? And this is actual data from the project itself. It looks exactly like what's in the middle. And what this told us was really, really important. It told us that customers that were looking at hosted solutions or cloud solutions were moving there because they wanted to grow their business. For some reason, they couldn't either invest internally or they were looking outside for expertise, but the focus for them in moving to hosted or managed solutions had been around growing the business. What's also important is where customers are in terms of their business goals. So on the left is something that we ask all the time in our surveys, which is, how is your business, what are the 5 goals of your business? So increase revenue, cut costs, improve service quality, speed time to market, or lower risk. And what we've seen for years and years is cut costs, and then we started to see increased revenue start to come back. But what was different last year, or this year when we did the study over last year, was we started to see a pretty steep decline in lowering costs, and for the first time, an increase in lowering risk and speeding time to market. So that is a change. That is a real shift in where customers are right now. And so what this tells us is that customers do want to innovate again. They do want to invest again, but they don't want to do it if it means that they're going to put their organization at risk. And so why do we care about that? Why is that important? Well, it's because of this. Right? We are the target generation. So I'm sure most of you are aware of the breach that Target had back in the Christmas period of last year. They had 70 million users affected. That's 25% of the US population, and it came at the worst possible time for Target. Remember, this is a great American brand, and during the Christmas period, there was this issue with the breach. It threw off their entire Christmas holiday period, which for them means that it infects their entire year for the next year. All right, so this is an issue that everybody has to think about when they think not only about their own IT infrastructure, but also as you go to cloud. This is an era where nobody wants to be on the end of that phone call. And what it also meant was that their CEO was fired and their CIO was fired, right? These are the first 2 firings that we can directly relate back to poor security and a breach. And of course, now what we know is there's many, many, many of these breaches that happen. We saw Home Depot most recently affected. I actually spent the day with the Home Depot CFO the day that that was announced, and she did a great job. She stood right up and said, we are so sorry that this happened, and we are addressing it straight away. It didn't go on for weeks and weeks and weeks like it did with Target. So we're getting a little bit smarter about how we message it and how we deal with it. And then, of course, we've seen all the breaches with JP Morgan, and that's not with their credit cards, that's with their websites. So this is the reality of the world that we live in, where the sphere of IT is increasing. The control for you as an IT organization, it's not always within your control, and yet there's more microscopic views upon what is happening in the security of your company more than ever. So here's something else I want you to think about. This is the same study that we did with Microsoft. Again, it was 2,000 customers of hosting. And we asked those customers, based on the type of environment that they were buying, whether it was traditional dedicated hosting, hosted private cloud, which is cloud capability, but the hardware is dedicated to you with a hoster. Public cloud, think Amazon, Google, Microsoft, and then SaaS applications. Who are the primary users of the applications that are hosted in those environments? And as you go from left to right, what you can see is increasing is that orange bar and that green bar. And what that is the customers of the companies. It is consumer-based customers and it's B2B customers. And this is very important. What it tells us is that as companies go to cloud capabilities, increasingly the end user is a customer, right? It's somebody that you really want to impress. So as an analyst, what this tells us is that there's going to be more money spent in the cloud than there is for internal environments. And that's because you always want to put your best foot forward in front of your customers. So rather than thinking of the cloud as this arena where it's low cost, taking out cost, it's cheap, I can pay for it when I want, I can turn it on, I can turn it off. This is much more about building a platform for growth for companies as they think about how they can innovate and compete against some of these new upstart companies that are moving into the market. What I also know as an analyst is that things change slowly, and this is a journey. The IT market is roughly $3 trillion annually, which means over the last 10 years, you've all spent about $30 trillion, and nobody does a rip and replace on that overnight, right? This is something that's going to change over time. What we asked the customers were, what were you spending on-premise versus off-premise, and how does that change over 2 years, and what does the infrastructure look like in each of those areas? And within this group, about 40% of their spending was on-prem, about 60% off-prem. And again, this is a somewhat biased sample because these are customers already moving into hosting and cloud. And we saw some movement to off-prem. But what we did see was for on-prem, the customers this year are looking to do more virtualization than they did last year. And I see this a lot now. We see customers going through a second wave of virtualization. And somebody put it into context for me really well just a couple of days ago. They said, if you're not 90% virtualized, you'll never get to the software-defined data center. And you'll never get to a true cloud computing data center. So we see a lot of customers going back and doing that last mile around virtualization. For off-prem, we see some changes around infrastructure or software as a service. But what we really saw the difference in this last year was when customers are doing hosted deployments with a hoster or a cloud provider, what they're investing in is hosted private cloud. Again, that is dedicated infrastructure running cloud capabilities for customers. And why is that? Well, it's because we're in the target generation, right? Everybody wants to innovate without risk. And what we also know is that public cloud is not the end game. Hybrid is the end game. And what we continue to see from customers, half of the customers in this study said that they have already implemented two clouds for interoperability. But what we also saw is that private was the dominant model. So we saw on-prem private cloud with a hosted private cloud, and then we also saw hosted private cloud with a public cloud. And what we saw with the most mature cloud customers is that they really didn't want to get involved with the public cloud. They really wanted to put that hoster in the middle. So again, on-prem to hosted private cloud, and then hosted private cloud to the public cloud. And why is that? It's because everybody needs service around the cloud right now. Nobody understands the cloud, right? There is a lot of mystery that surrounds the cloud. And there's a lot of providers out there that won't sign a business agreement, and they won't sign SLAs. And so it becomes a very difficult market to move into if you don't have a lot of experience there. So you're going to want to pick a provider that does have a lot of experience in this market. Something that doesn't change with the cloud is this, and that's security. We like to say that cloud changes everything but security. 75% or 77% of these customers said that any cloud movement that they made had to go through their audit, their security audit with their audit team. About 85% of the customers said they would pay a premium for security. So no longer this world where everybody expects security to be built in, right? There's an awareness now that security is important, and if I want it with cloud capabilities, I'm going to have to pay for it. And the premium was about 20% to 30%, depending on the environment. The more customers went to public cloud, the higher the premium they were prepared to pay. So this isn't a world where you're going to necessarily give up security. This is a new world where you have to actually demand security, but just be prepared that you're probably going to pay the premium for that. And what I advise you is when you go out and you look for providers that can meet your needs in this space, demand transparency. And that's really what everybody's asking for in all the studies that we do, and it was the same in this study. Everybody wants transparency. They want to be able to audit the environment. They want to be able to verify end-to-end encryption. They're looking to comply with regulations, right? There's a lot of things that go into security and compliance, but at the end of the day, this is really all about transparency. So for you, as you're looking for a provider, I would find a provider that's willing to open up the SOC. And this is when we knew hosting was going to be real. A lot of the hosters started to realize they had a better run environment than many of their customers, and they opened up the NOC, right, the Network Operations Center. Go look for a provider that's willing to open up their Security Operations Center to you. And look for somebody that has third-party compliance, validation, and certification. And I'd also look for somebody that's really going to address you and your relationship as a trusted advisor. Don't look for somebody that's just going to switch you on and let you run, right? Look for somebody that's with you the entire way. And then another thing to test for is look for a provider that's more than willing to provide clarity around what's a basic service and what's a premium service. So intrusion detection, that should be a basic service, right? And they should be very clear about that. SIM and log and event analysis, that is a premium service. But make sure you understand what it is you're getting as part of that basic service. And then one other thing I want you to think about is this, customer support. Again, I think there's a lot of myths in the cloud that because you're going to cloud, it's going to be low touch. I couldn't tell you how wrong that is. Cloud is a high-touch business. If you want to go to cloud, what we're increasingly seeing from customers like yourself is that they demand the same level of service they've been getting all along, either within their own IT department or as part of more of a structured managed service. When customers go to cloud, what are they looking for? They want someone to pick up the phone. They want someone to email them. The only time we see things like community forums do really well is when it's more of an open source or public cloud opportunity. But customers today have demanded and continue to demand and should demand that there is a customer service element here and that it is high touch. You're going to pay for it, but what you're also going to get back in return is a partner in this market. And so one of the things I heard today a lot that I want you to all think about, some of the customers of Rackspace that were up here today, many of them said this, and they said it in a slightly different way, but they said, Rackspace is our partner, right? I heard that a lot. Rackspace is here. They're an extension of our IT organization. That's something that you really should be listening for as you think about providers in this space, and then think about the types of services that you're looking for. So with that, if you have any questions, you can feel free to email me. Analysts love being emailed and told, please send me your slides. We love it. I am going to bring up the panel now, our private cloud panel. Darren Hansen, Jeff DeVoter, Arya Mahis,